What's up? How you doing, Ole?
What's up, Joe? I'm doing fine. And you?
Awesome. Good. Good. It's a bit early in the morning here, but managed to make it work. So that's how it always goes. I think first off, congrats on your new book. We talk about
Thank
that.
you.
It's awesome. It's been a long time
Thank you.
coming.
Yes, yes. Thank you for writing the forward once again. A
Of
fantastic
course.
forward.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, or my honor actually, to write your forward. So, um, I think first things first. We mainly talk about your book, but what is it? What is it about?
Yeah, so my book is called Fundamentals of Metadata Management, and it's actually an idea that I have had for, I guess, a little more than 15 years. Not to age myself, but it's a problem that has not gone away, and I don't think it will become any smaller with the rise of everything AI. So it's a book about how metadata management is performed through an enormous amount of technology and the problems that this creates.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, to back up for the audience here, right? So the word metadata has become, I would say, very, very popular all of a sudden. I think in no small part due to AI. It's one of these things where I noticed there's a few words that suddenly bubbled to the surface in the last year or two.
Mm-hmm.
Ontology,
Mm-hmm.
knowledge graph is actually two words.
Mm-hmm.
What else? Taxonomies to some extent, semantics, and then metadata. I think if I were to
Yeah.
list off the top of my head words that were not popular before that are now popular today, these are some
Yeah.
of them. Oh, and information and knowledge, I suppose, knowledge in general, right? And library,
Yeah.
information sciences, all these things. But like, I, what is metadata?
Yeah. Yeah. I want to define that for you and have a very clear cut definition. But before I do that, I want to say to the listeners of the podcast that I think my book should be read in the context that you have just described. But I also think, as to be completely honest, that some readers would perhaps become disappointed if they think that my book is some kind of magic key to AI, or if they think that my book has only been written because of the recent hype around AI
Hmm.
that I think will not go away, but like we will see some kind of bubble bursting, I think, in 1 or 2 years in the AI space, right? And then after that, we will hit some kind of plateau of productivity. But I definitely think there's like the entire movement around AI is overheated. Like there's a lot of tangible things that can be done with AI, everything AI, and so that will happen. But it's also like an immense amount of hype, and some things will not work. Obviously, I think we're close to that realization in the community. And so my book definitely taps into that reality. It can be used in that reality, but the problem as such is older than the recent AI hype or wave. And I also think it's not a problem that is in any way resolved by AI. Quite the contrary. I think AI is at risk of making it much worse, and it's very simple to explain. But first, let me cut out like what the definition, how I define metadata, right? I think for all of you listeners, I think it's quite important that the data community as such has defined metadata by subcategories, and that is not very useful because subcategories of a category is simply subcategories. It
What are
doesn't
some
really.
examples of these subcategories?
Yeah, you could say technical metadata, business metadata, operational metadata. Those are the typical ones listed in the Dharma DMBOK and other traditional sources on data management, right? These are just subcategories of metadata. They don't really capture what the definition, what the essence of metadata is. And my definition that is like a distillation of the thinking in library information science, which is my academic background. I have a PhD in that field. Is that metadata is at two places at once. It's actually quite simple. It's something that you have, for example, in the beginnings of books and on online bookstores. And so that metadata is both in a book and on online web stores for books. But it goes simply for everything that you could have in, say, a catalog, a data catalog, but also a catalog of, I don't know, like items that you could buy in a grocery shop, like anywhere. Like the essence of metadata is that it is in two places at once, so that you can find something somewhere else. You can find a book on your online bookstore. You can find the items that you want to purchase in a Home Depot or whatever it is, right? That's the essence of metadata. And once we accept that definition of metadata, something that can be in two places at once, things become tricky, because we realize that we have a lot of technologies that, for companies, map the IT landscape in companies. They do it for all kinds of purposes. And so that's really the idea of my book, is to describe a large and significant subset of these technologies that do not really perform anything in the company except surveying, monitoring, describing, managing the IT landscape in companies through metadata repositories. So that's really the core of my book.
So the classic definition that I've seen for metadata is it's data about data. Is that also correct? Because you mentioned that it could be something. I want to get into the something part, but something that can be in two places at once. So it's almost feels like quantum physics in a way. But what is that something? Is it the data about the data? What is that something that can be in two places at once?
It can really be anything of importance. But I discussed the saying like metadata is data about data in my book, because I don't think it's a scientific definition, but I don't think it's all that wrong either. I mean, implicitly, data about data kind of signals that it is at two places at once, right? Like, that's kind of the idea behind data about data. So I'm not like totally against the definition of data about data. It's just that it's not a very precise definition. Like, it's more like to explain in layman terms what metadata is. It's not
Well, to me,
wrong.
the data about data argument more seems like it's a pointer.
Yeah, sure,
Right?
sure.
So,
It's a pointer, but typically that pointer would point towards somewhere where the data about the data would also somehow be represented. Meaning
yeah.
that, like, if you're saying this is a file about customers, then that file would most likely also have customer data, right? So there you have it. It's in two places at once.
Yeah.
But it's an implicit thing in that saying. So I don't think it's wrong, but if we really have to capture, like, so I don't think it's wrong, but it's not precise enough to really capture the problem either. Because what happens is that typically we have a lot of, like, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with this, right? We have a lot of data engineering books, a lot of data science books, computer science books. They describe metadata as something that you manage through a particular language, through particular standards, and there's really nothing wrong with that. The problem, as I see it, is that such an approach it's very typical for engineering. Again, it's really not to bash engineers, not at all.
Oh, go for it.
Yeah, I've been called a data engineer myself. I didn't understand that. I am not a data engineer, but I have been called that in some of the critiques. Like, very much, like, you're way more exposed to that than me, that authors are criticized for all kinds of things, right?
Never happens.
So, yeah, never. I've never been criticized. So some people don't like that my background is too, like, librarian-ish. Some people like accuse me of not being enough of that and say that I'm a data engineer. So like
Is data engineer an insult in the library world?
no, not at all.
Or
It's just that
engineers?
I don't think I have the honor of calling myself that to phrase it like that. But I think no, it's not an insult. But I think that the engineering perspective of metadata lacks some significant perspectives, which is first and foremost that you do not build metadata from the source up. That's something you can do in theory, and it's interesting in theory, and it's super useful. But look a little, look into the reality and see what actually happens. I don't think that the vision of the semantic web is wrong, but it's a vision, right? What happened was something else. I don't think none of these ideas are wrong in theory, but how people act and use technology is just something else than these typically phrased by engineers visions on how to work with metadata.
Explain the semantic web for the listener.
Oh, the semantic web is basically an idea of tying together uh, a web semantically, and so instead of having multiple non-interoperable sources and descriptions on an internet, you would have a semantic web that was perfectly linked, and through that developed RDF and all that jazz. So the semantic web, and it was phrased by Tim Berners-Lee. There's this famous paper from 2001. I think many of our common friends cited a lot. Like, there's nothing wrong with these theories, these ideas. I embrace them, but if you look at a company reality, how companies work with metadata is just something different. And there's nothing wrong in that, but so it's just two opposing realities. And I think we have to address reality if we have to solve problems.
Yeah.
And so typically how I go about this is to say, like, I have been working a lot with knowledge graphs, for example, and explaining companies how to use knowledge graphs to correctly depict data sources at the metadata level. But I think personally that it's naive to anticipate that next to the clients that we're serving is another team with another technology. Like, to not take that into account is naive, I think, because that is what's happening in every single company.
So when you're working with knowledge graphs, so like, what teams are you typically working with?
Ideally, I would be working with chief data officers, teams, like referring to the chief data officer themselves, or similar roles.
Okay.
And that also creates a specific context for the usage of the knowledge graph that we offer to these companies, right? Which is data analytics. Everything from traditional BI to super advanced agentic AI visions for the company. But that flavors the meta model and the metadata that we offer to manage in that company, which is a different flavor than the chief information security officer or the endpoint management system team that also depicts the same IT landscape with different technologies. And so how I think my thinking can benefit AI and the trends that we see now is that if you capture the context or the semantics of the metadata of those other teams, if you're able to capture that and integrate it somehow into your solution, you can push forward on advanced analytic cases in ways that are way more precise and productive than if you ignore it.
So if I'm going to think about this right, you're talking about the metadata from the endpoint teams, for example, maybe the metadata from applications, the metadata from analytic systems, and all this metadata can be tied together to provide, as you say, precise, maybe semantical understanding or analytics, or like how does this all tie together?
I think what I describe, I call it the MetaGrid. I've been silent about that a little bit. Maybe we have time to talk about that also. But I didn't want that to turn into a hype, and at a certain point I sensed that was turning into a hype. And I don't want that. I want this concept to stick. I feel that I've been too silent about it, but that's another story. But anyway, I think what should be the ideal output of my suggestion is that you solidify all the technologies that depict the IT landscape at the metadata level. So I want to create, and this is what I call the MetaGrid architecture. I want to create something that works like as a mutual benefit for all the participants of this. Like if you imagine a set of teams just being closed in their own methodology, their own ways of working, and their own technologies. If you imagine that they come together in this team topology kind of structure that I end my book with, you can see the mutual benefit. Like if you have to not map all the servers in your company sitting on premises on various data centers tied to factories, for example, if you're the chief information security officer, if you can actually identify that somewhere else and put that in your system, your information security management system, which ISO 27001 enforces companies to have, if you can do that, you save a lot of time. And vice versa, right? If you're into advanced analytics and you want to push forward with some of the most business critical data that you have in your company, do you really think that it's the best idea to start with a whiteboard and an iPhone and calling up every single employee in the company to put that metadata into your metadata repository? I think that's a bad idea. I think you need to call all the other teams that have already depicted the IT landscape at the metadata layer, because they can offer you key insights. You can save a lot of time and you can work more precisely, right? So the diagrams that I have in the ending of my book, the MetaGrid architecture diagrams, they depict, okay, what kind of teams are working with processes? Who already knows this? And how can we use their metadata in our technologies? And so that's what I'm doing. I'm not saying that any of the technologies that companies work with will become obsolete. I'm saying we have a secret way to enhance the metadata quality, the precision, and the coverage in these technologies, and it's actually very easy. So that's like it's a bringing together of disciplines and technologies and methodologies that I offer with this book, Fundamentals of Metadata Management.
Yeah. So this MetaGrid idea, I know that we had talked about it on prior podcasts, and you did go silent with it for a bit. I thought that I wanted to hype it up even more, but oh well.
Yeah, I wanted so too at a certain point.
It happens. But okay, so help me out with this, or help the listener out with this. I kind of already know what you're doing, but so you have this vision of metadata in different areas. But metadata is also one of these things where I don't think a lot of, especially data engineers, for example, are cognizant of where this metadata resides, what it would look like if we saw it. Like, what are we looking for when we're looking for metadata within, say, a modern data stack, for example? Like, what are we trying to surface here?
Yeah, so I think like the modern data stack, rest in peace, it's an example of a set of technologies that primarily, at least, served data science and advanced analytics, right? You wanted to set up a stack so that, and companies obviously still do that. We don't call it the modern data stack anymore, but this stack had a purpose, right? It had an end goal. And that end goal was to serve all kinds of analytics. So what you want to store, or we want to store and transport the metadata through either a lot of very different technologies or very few, very big technologies, from data sources or data providers to data consumers, right? And with that data, we can do a lot of things, a lot of cool stuff. And so what you want to capture there is, at the metadata level, is obviously data that, like, you want to capture data sources that are really, really interesting. Ideally, inside that universe, you would turn that data into consumable entities. Some call that data products. I'm a big fan of that concept, some are not. And you want to obviously adhere to principles like fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Those are the FAIR principles. You have also, like, the DAT system. You have various standards of what kind of like what criteria data should adhere to. But all of these criteria and more also would be surfaced as metadata, so that it would be possible for someone to identify data that is ready for usage, for analytical consumption. We want good data sources that are easy to access with the right technology for the right purposes, right? So we certainly don't want a once a week full-time batch job if we're not looking for, like, you know what I'm saying, like, it's you have to engineer correctly the storage and transportation of the data, and you have to flash that at the metadata level. So think inside the modern data stack bubble, that is what we're doing. But I think the modern data stack, if we can use that term just in the case of the example here, I think that universe can benefit a lot from all the other parts of the company that is actually not deeply inside that modern data stack bubble, which is well, there's an enormous amount of technologies, but we could, like, all the other technologies that use metadata repositories for various purposes. Those can be learning management, it can be quality management, knowledge management, it can be information security, data privacy, records and information management. That's typically to serve lawyers and compliance, and more IT internal activities such as ITIL processes that are documented in configuration management databases, or enterprise architectures systems, which are also used in a lot of companies. All those technologies typically sit outside of a modern data stack universe, but they nevertheless contain much of the same metadata. So I'm just rambling here. Is it okay? Like, can you?
Yeah, I can follow. And then I think the question would be, how are all these different metadata tied together, right? So if I have something in, say, a learning management system, like you said, I have some other metadata in my modern data stack. I have other data, I don't know, say I have data in SharePoint, for example.
Sure.
So I'm basically, if I were to have metadata on all of my information assets company wide, for example, how do I tie all this together so they're discoverable, fair, and I guess useful, right? How do I do that?
Yeah. So that's the next big question, obviously, and I had to make some choices writing the book, and so I decided to not insist on one way of doing that. So maybe a bit of theory, like, I don't want to make it very academic, but a little bit. I think I need to say that I'm very inspired by microservices and the data mesh movement. microservices, obviously, for simply tearing apart the big monoliths of technology that really executes a value chain in a company into small computational parts. It's a very beautiful and extremely difficult architectural style, and I think very few companies master that. Data mesh is a recent movement. Obviously, you have covered it better than most, Joe, on your podcast. I was very inspired by the data mesh movement. I still am. I think the word data mesh in itself will go away. I think the ideas behind data mesh will stay,
Mm-hmm.
and that's also why I was not cool of hyping the word MetaGrid too much. I wasn't too like. I'm afraid that I would kind of kill my ideas in a very short hype wave, and then I would become known as the guy who coined a term that is no longer cool. And so that made me really afraid. And so that's why I stayed quiet about the MetaGrid for a while. Because you can kind of phrase it, and I do that in the book also, as a third wave of data decentralization, right? You want to, like all these teams that I've described in our conversation so far, they work in bubbles. It's not only the data engineers. I'm not like particularly after the data engineers. Like chief information security officers also insist on their own technology, their own single source of the truth, right? So we have a lot of these technologies that are kind of, I call them single view of the world monoliths. It's a concept that I cite the Teen Topologies book for this kind of monolith. I think it's a very precise way of describing it, and what it is really is that it structures a particular set of metadata that becomes like this single view of the world, and we see the IT landscape like this. This is how we have structured it, and that's really what the IT landscape is. Except in the office next door is another team with another technology depicting the IT landscape, and it doesn't look like that other team's metadata. So basically, what I'm saying here is that we have these small monoliths of metadata, and to really advance with metadata management, to make it better, we need to address that reality. We need to accept that because it's there. It's like I have been contacted. I think one of the persons was okay with saying it out loud. Gregor Wobbe from UBS, he's in New York. Like they have been building this kind of architecture, MetaGrid architecture inside UBS. But I have many more architects and engineers that have reached out to me saying this is exactly the problem that we're facing, that we're trying to solve through documentation, integrations, diagrams, even a shared like platform. And so people can build what I call an enterprise metagrid if they want to. Except I'm just like, I took the decision to not define a standard, not advise for a specific technology, leave it up to people. But I say that like the metagrid itself is documentation, it's integrations, it can be diagrams, it can be sample data sets. Like that is it. That is really it.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to push back, and I think it was a mistake to let go of the term metagrid.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think because data mesh, for example, right? You can say whatever you want about whether it has future viability. I have my own ideas on that, but what it did is it did provide a rallying cry and I think a focal point and a term that people could get behind.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when Zhamak came up with the articles, towards the end of the last decade there, people rallied behind it. Right. It only took 2 blog posts.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic.
And it changed the world. I mean, I think in a lot of ways it influenced what you did with the MetaGrid.
Absolutely.
You know,
I have a huge, I have huge respect for the data movement, and yeah,
yeah.
like I
But it
know
fell
that
apart, I
movement a
think,
lot.
because it didn't. What happened was vendors took data mesh
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden, it's just like what you see with AI right now. Like every company's an AI company. You got to remember a few years ago, before ChatGPT came out, every company was a data mesh company. That was the
Yeah.
hot thing.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Every
Yes.
vendor, you'd walk around conference halls like, we have data products. We're AI data products now, but data products, data mesh companies, everybody had some sort of a data mesh offering,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, it was a federated computational governance layer for data mesh, which was not baked in, and that was one of the four pillars of data mesh, and that wasn't there. And so I think that the implementation of it, the guiding vision of this is how you do it in a prescriptive way, I think that's where it sort of became anarchy in a lot of ways, because now every vendor could say, well, I interpret what Zhamak wrote in data mesh as being this. This is a data product. And then you look at the demos and it's like, cool, you're sharing a table. That's
Yeah.
not a data product.
No, no,
It's
agreed.
data product
Agreed.
light. Right, but
Yeah.
I would say for you, the MetaGrid, I don't know. I would probably resurface it, but that's my own opinion.
No, but I will do that, Joe. I think you're right. I think you're right in that. And I'm slowly doing that, but maybe it's just a question of personality also. Like I despise hype waves. I really despise them. Every single part of the hype wave I do not like. And I think it sometimes I look at those hype waves and I see institutionalized lies.
Well, is metadata a hype wave?
No, not metadata, but data mesh certainly became one,
It
and
became one.
I'm not like I'm not, and then data mesh was taken out of specifically out of the hype wave, but there are also it's not to only like it's not something that I have particularly against Gartner. Like you also have the Forrester waves and like ThoughtWorks Technology Radar and like all these. I like them, all these overviews, and obviously you need to map trends somehow. But I'm very inspired by Bill Inmon and what he did with the data warehouse. Like people said he was a weird guy until people understood he wasn't, and I'm hoping a little bit that the MetaGrid becomes something like that. But I need to talk more about it. I understand.
Yeah. I was gonna say, because I know Bill really well, and I think it's yeah. I would say lean into the hype. That's my advice. It's one of those
Yeah,
things where I think
yeah.
Bill, for example, like when the data warehouse came out, it almost died.
Mm,
It almost died
yeah.
because nobody could understand what it was. He tried selling it, tried selling the idea to IT teams. He said that was a complete bust. It was only when marketing teams adopted it, right? So
Mm,
non-IT, non-technical people adopted data warehousing where they could get customer 360 view. And companies like Walmart were adopting data warehouse, that it started to take off. But it literally just about died on the vine actually because it wasn't getting any attention. So anyway, I'm not going to turn this into a advice
no, but it's
column, but I would say lean into the hype cycle, dude. Like the hype cycle exists for a
yeah,
reason, and if you
yeah,
have that attention, lean into it. It's you
yeah.
don't get that opportunity that often. So
No, no, you're right. You're right. Yeah, you're right. And also, like, funny thing is that out of the book reviews that I'm getting already, even though my book is not out in public release, not at least on Amazon, but it is out. You know how it is.
yeah,
It's always a little quirky with the publication dates, but like I am getting a lot of feedback from people like non-IT people, or also just people like in the periphery of like data engineering, data science, like just really
interesting.
liking my book. So that's really nice because that's also the reality I address because that is the reality. I am describing the reality. I hate to say it, but it's the many theoretical books on metadata management that live in a fantasy world. I describe reality. Now that reality is not beautiful. It's not perfect, not at all, but it is the reality, friends, right? So we
Hmm.
better learn from that. We can learn a lot from it. We can improve it, and we can advance. We can make progress with it. So that's my book basically, and I definitely need to like speak up more on the MetaGrid. I am planning to do that. I have actually like rebooted my MetaGrid notes on Substack a little bit, and
Nice.
I will talk more about it. You're right.
Did you take a
Um,
break just because you're finishing the book?
I took a break, so well, with the Metagrid talks, I took a break like for several reasons. I joined a tech vendor. I didn't want my followers and readers to think that I was suddenly like turning the MetaGrid into a technology, because it is not a technology. So I went silent there a little bit, to make it clear for my readers that like it may not be the best thing for my career to always be so loyal to my ideas, but I am very loyal to my ideas. The Metagrid
Yeah.
is not a technology, and I didn't want that perception to be part of like I guess I can say who I work for. Is that okay, Joe?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I work for Action. Like I'm the chief evangelist in a company called Action. They bought a technology called Senia, which is now the heart of their data intelligence platform, which is a knowledge graph, and it's a beautiful technology. So no more shilling. It's just to say
Yeah.
that that technology is beautiful in itself. It works perfectly. It serves customers all over the world, and many other technologies in many other technology categories does the same. And so I didn't want the MetaGrid to be associated with this technology, because it works fine in itself. It doesn't need some concept that to be attached to it. So certainly didn't want that scenario. That was what happened with data mesh, right? That every company was a data mesh company, and I think that was a little unfortunate for the data mesh movement.
But the observation that I have with where data mesh sort of went wrong was I feel like Jamak was very hands off with how data mesh was covered
Mhm.
in the world. I think my opinion is she could have been a bit more prescriptive in terms of this is how I define a data product, right?
Mm.
So Bill Inmon, for example, right, when he defined data warehouse, he had a set of principles like subject orientation, time variant, and so forth, right? And I think that at least specified conditions under which you would have a data warehouse,
Mm.
for management's to support management's decision making. That was a final part, right? And there's a few other pieces in there, but the whole point was like it's a set of criteria, and then but it wasn't a technical implementation per se. But in one sentence, you could encapsulate what a data warehouse was. Data mesh to a larger extent, I think, suffered because it became sort of this nebulous thing where it's decentralized sharing of data products, but what is a data product? So it
Mm.
becomes a very fractal definition of
Yeah.
now you have to define a data product, but then there's pillars to data product, and then, gosh,
Mm.
what's all the pillars and all this other stuff, right? But yours, I think, and this is something you hit on in your talk at Day to Day Texas, what is the metagrid is already here,
Yeah,
actually,
you bet.
right?
It's already there in every single company. Yeah, you bet. I'm sorry, I was cutting you off. I just got
Well,
excited.
no, that's all. That was the punchline. Is unlike a lot of the things like a data warehouse, like that wasn't there before. Like it required separating your analytics and having a store that was outside of your OLTP systems, your transactional systems. Data mesh, for example, doesn't just exist right now. Like you would have
Mm.
to have built. That's what Schmack's doing with Next, right? And she actually calls it autonomous data products now because it's
Mm.
just. I think it's a bit of a actually better name.
Yeah, agreed. I think
But I
it's a
mean, I
great
know
name.
she's kind of like consciously like de-emphasizing the data mesh term as well right now.
Mm.
Not that it hasn't gone. I mean, the spirit's still there, but the term itself, I think, got like it just got hijacked by so many vendors. But for you, I think the key difference is the metagrid's already here,
Yeah,
right? It's just I think allowing people, the lens through which to see the metagrid. That's what's missing.
yeah. No, but you're right. I would make that the motto. The metagrid is already here.
It already is.
It
I mean,
already is.
when
Thank
you
you.
said that, I was like, shit, you're right. Because at first when I heard about Metagrid, I was like, oh, great. Here's another guy with another
Yeah.
crockpot fucking idea about some crazy shit. But then you mentioned it, and I'm like, okay, actually, no, he's absolutely right. It's already here.
Oh,
It
thank
just needs
you.
to be seen. Actually, it's been hiding in plain sight the whole time.
Yeah, Joe, that is so kind of you to say. Thank you very much.
Well,
Here's the paradox for you. Here's the paradox, right? When we discuss metadata as engineers, I don't consider myself an engineer, but I can definitely have a conversation with engineers. Consider myself more of like an information architect or knowledge architect or whatever you want to call it. But here's the paradox, right? We discuss metadata management and we discuss technologies as if they have to be pure and
mm,
complete. But I have never seen technology that does not serve a purpose. And I have never seen that purpose not shape the technologies we use. And that manifests itself in the meta model of these technologies, in the metadata of these technologies. You will not have a data warehouse functioning as your CMDB because it doesn't work like that. It's not intended for that purpose. And so that shapes the structure of the CMDB and the data warehouse. That is not up for discussion. However, in the engineering context, in engineering discussions, we talk about technology as if they were intention agnostic, and they never are. Never, ever. And I've seen that throughout my career. I've seen it as a fresh out of university. I've seen it in industry, and I've seen engineers talking about technology, also very, very skilled engineers with technical capabilities that I would never achieve, that I knew when I had those conversations I would never achieve. And nevertheless, I also knew at that time that they were building metadata structures that were intention specific. And so they would necessarily clash with other structures of metadata, other places in the company. And there's nothing wrong with that. But once you open your eyes to it, you get a lot of very interesting interaction between these metadata repositories, because you can save a lot of time, you can increase precision, you can take better decisions on what data sources to use for which purposes. Like, imagine, for example, the Chief Information Security Officer. That person has as his or her task to measure the information security risks against a company, right? That is the task. To put a strategy to create a strategy so that you best mitigate a maximum amount of risks against the company. However, because we do not realize this siloed metadata universe, that person finds itself searching for servers, searching for endpoints, looking for fiber cables. Why is that? That is because that person is doing basic metadata management, because that person typically does not understand that a lot of other teams in the company can do that work for them. They have already done it. And so that's the fundamentals of metadata management. As I see it, that is the MetaGrid. That is the MetaGrid. It's the basic coming together of teams. It's not yet another data team. You were right in pointing that out. We discussed that earlier, and you were right in pointing that out. This is not
explain that to the audience, because that was a discussion with you and me.
Yeah. Obviously, like I put forward the idea of a data discovery team that manages, or that coordinates, that does not manage, but that coordinates metadata repositories. But think of this as a virtual team, really inspired by the team topology movement here. Think of this as a team that consists of team members from the office of the CIO, of the office of the Chief Information Security Officer, of the Chief Data Officer's office, like representatives, people that represent various groups with various technologies that come together and understand that they have shared metadata across various systems. Imagine the improvement, the acceleration of data quality in these systems. And if you really want to talk AI, imagine what the MetaGrid documentation would do for context understanding. Like, just understanding, like, okay, processes in our company, well, it's all here. It's in this system. It's described like that. Capture that metadata, that knowledge or semantics, if you will, to improve, precision in large language models, something like that, or even like agentic behavior, right? Understanding better the various applications that are working with specific tasks. And then just a final rant here, like I know you have seen the release of ChatGPT 5 or GPT-5, right?
Yeah.
Um, when we spin up an endless amount of applications, which in a footnote cannot be done without paying for storage and compute and but if we can spin up an endless amount of applications, we only face an exponentially bigger problem of metadata management. It doesn't make anything go away. It doesn't make anything easier in terms of metadata management. It will only make it more complicated.
Oh yeah, and I think it just occurred to me too when you're talking about the teams. Like, what are your thoughts on having agents actually handle the MetaGrid?
I think I think if you set them off correctly, if you steer them, then why not? But right now, I see it as something that is um, I see it as a too technologically advanced solution for a problem that is quite easily solvable at human scale
Yeah,
today.
if it's solvable at human scale, I suppose what are the barriers to entry for teams having the incentive to surface and work with other teams to build a MetaGrid within their organization?
Well, I think that some company, like I know quite a lot of companies, like, and these are Fortune 100 companies that are already doing it. So
Hmm.
it can totally be done, and it's super,
Yeah,
super useful. The incentives, like I put forward a small sociology in my book, the good, the bad, and the ugly, I call it, and people have a lot of motivation, incentives for. People have a lot of incentives for not being good, like profit, promotion. so so if you want to become the VP of something in a company, you need to implement technology. That motivation typically requires, or that incentive, apologies, typically requires you to not treat metadata well. I've seen that a lot. But it also goes for technology vendors. It also goes for consultancy companies. Like all these three parties, they can play the role of the good, the bad, and the ugly, depending on their incentives. But
well then
typically,
that's go on. What you said?
yeah. But so typically, I am positive by nature, Joe. But I have seen a lot of ugly, and I've seen a lot of bad in metadata management. I gotta say, I gotta say.
What stands out to you?
Um,
You don't have to name any names, but I'm just curious. Like, what was like the worst thing you've ever seen?
oh, the worst thing. I was thinking of good things that stood out.
Well, we'll go to the good things in a bit, but I always like to,
The bad
start off on the
things.
negative.
I think it's very typical, but just like I hate to see millions and millions of dollars just go up in smoke, like just being thrown at a big fire for nothing. Big projects that once and for all will map some type of metadata in a company that has been through many mergers and acquisitions, and like that could be amounts of applications or types of data or sensitivity or processes or physical infrastructure, like it could be whatever kind of metadata you want. But like these big projects where one type of technology is used to create one big overview of something and then it fails, I hate to see that. And I've seen that a lot. And that really, like, yeah,
Yeah.
that hurts my soul, to be
What
honest.
stands out as the some of the greatest achievements that you've seen?
I think there are a lot of silent heroes in metadata, like people that work for companies and that are very dedicated and that have been with them for a long time, and then understand something that they give to a lot of people without keeping that knowledge to themselves. Metadata management really, really, really benefits from that. seen that a lot, and I've seen some of those people being treated very badly, and I've seen some of those people being treated really, really nicely, as they should. So, so I think to leverage, like to basically, I just can't understand why metadata isn't seen as a strategic asset. Like it can save companies an enormous amount of time and money, and like make them advance faster. So I've always been puzzled by that, but maybe the times are changing. I don't know.
I think the times are changing, but my concern is and this is kind of a broader observation right now, right? So what I'm noticing is the knowledge and information worlds are meeting the data and AI worlds. And I think these are actually two separate worlds. You have the library sciences, the knowledge group over here, quote unquote, like knowledge graph people, like all my knowledge graph friends. It's like they're hidden in a cave for years and they found sunlight all of a sudden. People are like, oh my gosh, look, there's people living in caves.
Yeah.
So they're stoked. And then you have the data and AI people over here who have just been doing whatever they've been doing for ages. We've been doing machine learning data, and that's been a central thing. I feel like in a lot of ways, the challenge is going to be both for metadata and I think the broader knowledge and information ecosystem is it's part marketing. Actually, it's largely marketing, and actually, I think it's about 99% marketing. Now that I think about it, and don't take this the wrong way, but I feel like the knowledge and information people are like the worst marketers I've ever seen in my entire life.
No, agreed.
They cannot. When they try and explain what they do, I'm like, I have no fucking idea what you just said.
No.
At all. And then it's not only that they can't explain it, but they're often very condescending in terms of, well, you're just a data person. You don't get it.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, yeah, but I have all the budget. So whatever. Same with the engineering people. Right. So it's like, I feel that it's almost a condescending tone from the knowledge and information people towards the data and engineering space. Like we obviously have so much more history than you, like thousands of years of running libraries. And, but metadata, for example, right? To me, it's getting attention now because supposedly it's important for AI and all this other stuff. But the marketing of it up to now has been very, very bad. And my concern is that all this stuff goes away precisely because people will just look at it and say, great, I don't know why I'd invest in this thing. You haven't explained to me what you told me what metadata is. Don't understand what that is because all the descriptions of metadata I've seen, are quite horrible. I think you've done a pretty good job at it, but it's.
Thank you.
But yeah, that's just a general observation of the space where I feel like the knowledge and information people, they're going to go away back into obscurity if they cannot figure out the marketing problem.
Yeah. No, great rant. I totally agree. I actually need to leave at the hour. I have a call coming up.
No worries, yeah.
But and it's not to answer that. I want to answer
one,
this.
good job.
I want to answer this, Joe. But I think like I studied library information science. I've been repeating this many times, right? I began studying in the early 2000s, and there was this campaign running at our university saying we cataloged the 0.0000001% of the internet that you need to know. And I was like, okay, so you're facing a revolution. You're facing a vision of what we talked about in the beginning, the semantic web. And you're saying that like a disproportionate amount of what's on that web is just crap. Do you think that people are going to listen to you or to everyone else that's jumping on this fairy tale, this adventure? Who do you think people will follow? The grumpy old librarians or everyone else that's just joining and contributing with what they have, right?
Right.
And so I was very well aware from the beginning of when I began studying that I find myself in a situation where something that I have learned is really, really important, but I need to get into the conversation and precisely present what it is I have to offer. If not, people will certainly not listen, and they don't need to listen. So I'm totally like, that's perhaps why some grumpy old librarians called me a data engineer. I don't know.
It's an insult, but
Yeah.
well, I know you got to get to your meeting, man. Thanks for the great chat. I'll see you in Europe, probably on a few occasions. So
Big Data London, I think. Big Data London. Yeah,
that'll be the first one. Awesome. Well, have a good day. We'll chat soon, buddy. All right,
Thank
later.
you.